If you put a Milwaukee soul singer and a pack of Boston party rockers in the same room, you'd usually get a noise complaint. Instead, you get the secret history of Love-itis, a track that somehow found its way from Pacific Northwest garage punk basements to the R&B royalty of Toronto. Grab a seat, man, and let me tell you about a musical rabbit hole I went down the other night. You know those songs that just feel like they've always been there? The ones that every bar band seems to know? And you swear you've heard a dozen different versions of it, but you never really know where it actually started? Well, I found the ultimate one. Have you ever heard of a track called Love-itis? Yeah, it sounds like a made-up disease from a cartoon, but it's actually one of the coolest, grittiest, most traveled songs in rock and soul history. The story of how this song bounced around is basically a roadmap of 1960s and 70s music. So picture this. It's the mid to late 1960s. We're not in Motown, and we're not in Memphis. We're in Milwaukee. There's this guy named Harvey Scales, and he is fronting a group called the Seven Sounds. Harvey was an absolute powerhouse. People used to call him the James Brown of Milwaukee, because his stage presence was just electric. He's in the studio, and he writes this track with a guy named Albert Vance. Actually, here's a fun piece of trivia to keep in your back pocket. A guy named Rudy Jacobs was also initially acknowledged as a co-writer on it, though history mostly remembers Scales and Vance. They laid down the original track of Love-itis, and man, it is pure sweat and jam. This track has a groove that just won't quit. It's got that driving R&B beat that hits you right in the chest. You've got the singer basically testifying, just straight up begging and caught up in a love they can't shake. It's raw, it's brassy, and it's got that unpolished soul feel that makes it impossible to sit still. It started out making noise as a regional hit, but a vibe this good was never going to stay tucked away in the Midwest. This is where the story gets really fun, because a great song is like a chameleon. Cut to the Pacific Northwest. You know the Sonics, right? Those absolute pioneers of garage rock from Washington State? The guys who sounded like they were actively trying to blow out their amplifiers on every single take? Somehow, this tight, brassy Milwaukee soul tune makes its way to them, and the Sonics do what the Sonics do best. They completely tear it apart and rebuild it with fuzz pedals, screaming vocals, and sheer volume. When the Sonics got a hold of Love-itis, they didn't just cover it, they weaponized it. They stripped away the polished R&B horns and replaced them with distortion and primal energy. It went from a soul man pleading for a cure to a garage punk screaming from the rafters. It's wild because the skeleton of the song, its infectious rhythm and the catchy lyrics, is still exactly the same, but the attitude is completely transformed. It proves that a great hook works just as well with a fuzz box as it does with the horn section. But the track's journey was just getting started. Now we're bringing it to the forefront in Canada. In the late 60s, Toronto had an unbelievable soul and R&B scene, and right at the center of it was a band called Mandala. They were legendary for their live shows. They even performed in these crazy pinstripe gangster suits. Their guitarist was a guy named Dominic Troiano, who was an absolute wizard on the fretboard. Mandala gets their hands on Love-itis in 1968, and they managed to find this perfect sweet spot between Harvey Scales' original soul and the Sonics' rock energy. They gave it this massive, driving, almost psychedelic soul rock vibe. It became a huge hit for them in Canada. If you talk to anyone who was haunting the clubs in Yorkville back in the day, they'll tell you that when Mandala launched into Love-itis, the roof practically blew off the venue. Okay. So we've gone from Milwaukee soul, to Pacific Northwest garage rock, to Toronto psychedelic R&B. Where does it end up? Boston, Massachusetts. Enter the J. Geils Band. Before they were doing MTV hits like Centerfold, the J. Geils Band was the ultimate undisputed champion of sweaty, blues-soaked house party rock and roll. And Love-itis was absolutely tailor-made for them. They recorded it for their 1975 album Hotline, and man, they owned it. Peter Wolf, the lead singer, had that incredible, fast-talking, jive-walking charisma. He delivers the vocals like a guy who has genuinely lost his mind to this disease. Add in Magic Dick wailing away on the harmonica, taking the place of the original horn sections and the garage. Rock fuzz guitars and J. Geils himself laying down those thick blues rock chords. They turned it into a stadium-sized party anthem, especially when they played it live.
Love trouble. Love trouble. He didn't have no prescription. I couldn't make a description. He said, Wolf, you got a case called love.
In fact, when it was featured on their legendary 1976 live album Blow Your Face Out, the industry magazine Record World called this performance a contagious disease like the boogie woogie flu. But it's a bug you won't mind having. They were dead on. The Jay Giles Band took all the DNA of the previous versions, the soul, the garage aggression, the tight musicianship, and blended it into this perfect piece of 70s rock. A great groove never really dies, it just keeps affecting people. A track written by a couple of guys in Milwaukee who just wanted to make people dance. It ends up getting shredded by garage punks, slicked up by Canadian soul rockers, and eventually blasted out to packed arenas by the biggest American rock bands of the 70s. And there you have it. You can change the tempo, swap out the horns for guitars or harmonicas, and even change the outfits from sharp suits to torn denim. But if the bones of a song are good, if that groove is deep enough, it's going to catch on. 4 different bands, 4 different decades. But it's still that same infectious tune, Love-itis. Seeing it evolve from a 60s soul nugget into those heavy, rock and prog influenced versions just goes to show you that a legendary groove never truly dies. It just changes its clothes. If you enjoyed tracing the DNA of this track with me today, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're here for the deep cuts, the rare covers, and the 60s and 70s rock history that usually gets left out of the liner notes. Join our community of music freaks, and let's keep the vinyl spinning together. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.